Shazam! Fury of the Gods stars Zachary Levi, Jack Dylan Grazer, Helen Mirren, Lucy Liu, with David F. Sandberg returning, a sequel to the very heartwarming and really fun first Shazam from 2019. With the DC universe kind of in a disarray, about to experience a reboot pretty soon with James Gunn's leadership, I was hoping that maybe this would survive the cutting room floor of those reboots, and it looks like maybe some of that will be staying intact. We come to expect this with superhero movies now. They have at least 2 mid-credit scenes in this movie that set up for future things. Depending on how the box office returns go, we may or may not get a Shazam 3, but I could easily see Shazam popping up again in some capacity. The plot is very simple, and I think it's in a lot of ways very similar to the first one, although I would say it's much more grander. Billy and his family are now the Philly Fiascos, as they're described by the public, protecting the city of Philadelphia from various crimes and disasters that occur. And these 3 goddesses that are sisters show up in order to take back the powers from Shazam and his family, so they can grow the Tree of Life and take their power back in their own realm. If you see my review of the first Shazam, I did that a few years ago. I really liked that one. I thought it was a really nice breath of fresh air. I am an MCU fan, but I do like some variety once in a while, and I think Shazam was what we really needed. I know the Joker movie also counts too, but this was also a good breath of fresh air too. Had a really good amount of emotional weight to it that I was not expecting. Billy trying to come to terms with what happened with him and his mom, him accepting his foster family as his real family, using his powers for his own kind of personal gain since he's never really had anything successful in his life. And Zachary Levi was a huge revelation for me at the time. He was already famous for shows like Chuck, but this one really propelled him on the map for me. And I still, to this day, will always laugh hysterically at this scene.
I'd like to purchase some of your finest beer, please.
Never gets old. Never. I wouldn't call it a memorable movie necessarily, because there are some things in there that made me go, I don't know about that. So with all the stuff that's been happening in DC the last several years, I wanted to see how they would handle this. The movie is getting a really mixed response from critics, and maybe a more positive one from audiences, but the reception is not great. I think it's fine. Certainly not bad at all. I think it's a lot better than what most people are saying, which if you've been following me for a while, it's really no surprise coming from me. But unfortunately, this movie does have some issues, and I think maybe even bigger than the first one did, particularly with the villains, which we'll get to in a minute. Zachary Levi is once again entertaining and really likable as this character. Knows how to properly use the youthful energy that he had in the first one, similar to the movie Big with Tom Hanks, where you can buy that's a 13-year-old trapped in a 30-year-old man's body. This time though, young Billy Batson's about 17 going on 18. So whenever we see him in kid form, which I was kind of surprised that it wasn't that much, he's a little more different and wiser this time, although he does seem to be clinging on to his foster siblings almost to a fault. But whenever he's Shazam, he does the Tony Stark thing where he deflects with humor and bravado and sassiness, acting like nothing really gets to him, when in actuality it really does. Jack Dylan Grazer as Freddie Freeman, once again, is really hysterical. Also energetic and talkative without becoming annoying. Almost like what Tom Holland was as Peter Parker. Pre-No Way Home. And I really do like seeing the superhero family dynamic when they learn about certain things going on inside the secret lair of the wizarding hideout, like one particular pen that they discover that writes answers on its own, similar to the parchment in the Harry Potter stuff where you write something on a book and then it gives you the answer back. Kind of makes me wish they had a Harry Potter reference in here somewhere. I think all the siblings have their moments, but I actually really like Mary. I think she's probably the most humble and really kind-hearted. Not to say that all of them aren't, but I always felt like she was the more anchored person in the group, if that makes any sense. And I think she's the same person in superhero form as she is in her normal form. Because in the previous one, when she turned into Shazam, it was a different actress. I don't know exactly what went on there. It's a small nitpick. I don't really think it's really a spoiler, but if you look up the IMDb cast list, you probably would notice the difference. I also like that the foster parents have a little more to do this time, particularly the foster mom, without being too specific. It actually helps Billy realize that he actually does value his foster family and learns not to get too attached to them out of fear of losing them. I do wish the movie gave us more of that sprinkled throughout, but I can at least appreciate how it does give some setup and payoff for it. And I think the visual effects look pretty good. I think David F. Sandberg has a really good way of blending CGI effects with actual imagery, real life stuff in front of a camera, similar to what Sam Raimi was able to do in his movies. Same thing can be said for Michael Bay, love him or hate him. And how Sandberg is able to use certain scary imagery with the creatures that show up at the climax of the movie, he actually puts it to really good use. Sometimes though, it's a little too much, and it kind of makes the film a little inconsistent tonally. I think Sandberg is known for doing scary movies. I guess you could say he's like the Sam Raimi for the DC universe, since Sam Raimi is known for Evil Dead, and he found a good way with his Spider-Man movies and Multiverse of Madness to blend horror-like elements in there with the fun, splashy superhero fun that we all want to see, and also the emotional elements too. With all that being said, this movie definitely has some issues. As I said, there really isn't a whole lot of emotional focus that's given to it, with Billy's arc trying to accept his family again in a way, but also not getting too attached to it. Again, I do appreciate that they gave some setup and payoff for it, but I think maybe just a little more sprinkled in the second act would have sufficed. And to backtrack into the positive for a second, the one sister, I can't remember the actress's name, she's the love interest for Freddie Freeman. Well, I kind of saw what was going to happen as the film went on. I still thought it was pretty effective in how they handled it. When it comes to Lucy Liu and Helen Mirren, two actresses that I've really liked elsewhere in other movies or shows, they give 110% to both their parts. Unfortunately, the backstories are very lacking. All we really know is through this certain scene where Billy and his adoptive siblings are looking through all these books and they learn about how these goddesses got their powers and how they got to where they're at right now, but it's nowhere near as compelling as I think the filmmakers were hoping for. As opposed to someone like Dr. Savannah in the first one, I felt like there was at least some good reason for him to be the way he was in that movie, even though I think there could have been more elaboration on what he went through from childhood to when we see him now in the present storyline. I felt like there was at least something underneath the surface with him. And in a way, you could say he's like a dark reflection of Billy Batson, who was rejected by his parents, and he chose to go down the wrong path. And as far as a climactic battle, it's stretched out way too long. It's entertaining, and it's not obnoxious to watch, although after a while it does get kind of insufferable, playing into the overall problem where I think it tries to bite off a little more than it could chew. And I didn't really care too much about the goddess's motivations either, which is probably because of how underwritten the two villains' backstories were. I didn't feel like there was enough for me to attach to what was going on. With Shazam's side of the story, absolutely. Not so much on the villain side, because as certain other people have said, your movie's only as good as your villain. And I try not to play into the compare game between Marvel and DC because I don't really think it's fair to compare the two of them. You could say whatever you want about Ant-Man 3, but that movie at least had Jonathan Majors as Kang the Conqueror, who legitimately felt like he was a force to be reckoned with, and a much more scary villain than Thanos ever was and could ever be. In that respect, I felt like that movie had something going for it. And it's nothing against Helen Mirren or Lucy Liu personally. I just didn't really get the same impression with their two characters. And if I feel like I didn't address it at least once here, I would probably not be doing this justice, but there is a certain choice that's made at the end of the movie. I'm not going to say what it is, where I actually thought it was pretty bold what they did, but then something happens in the last 10 minutes. And it basically flips it around again. And this is not the movie's fault. It's the marketing. They literally spoiled this moment in the ads, which I saw a glimpse of on Instagram. Like everybody else, I thought, you gotta be kidding me. If you've seen the movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. And yes, there are 2 post-credit scenes. Not gonna say much else except go see for yourself. Shazam! Fury of the Gods is not a bad movie by any stretch. I just think that there could have been more attention to detail on certain things in the second act, with the emotional weight behind it, and put more emphasis on the 2 villainous characters. Also perhaps cut down at least 10 minutes of it, because I think it was stretched way too thin, lacking the emotional focus that I think the first one had. And if you want to know, do I like this better than Ant-Man 3? I don't really see them as any different from each other. They're almost, in some ways, as far as I feel about them, they're interchangeable for me. I have my pros and cons with each one, but for different reasons. And I think each one is not only entertaining, but I think there's at least enough underneath the surface of both of them that keeps me from saying, nope, Stonewall, movie's not good now. Would I like to see a sequel for Shazam? I mean, if it's possible, sure. I think this is something that the DCU really needs, besides maybe Wonder Woman. I keep emphasizing this about Wonder Woman, but a lot of it was because I just adore Gal Gadot so much. And with all the stuff that's happening with the DCU as of late, I may or may not do reviews on all the other ones that I haven't covered yet, so we'll see how it goes. But if there is a possibility for a Shazam 3, I'm more than happy to see it. So those are my thoughts on Shazam 2. Thank you guys so much for watching. Comment below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, and I'll see you in the next one.